You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. To read the full notice of your rights and protections, go to www.boston.org/MPO_NO_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Stella Jordan via the chat box or at sjordan@ctps.org or call her at 857-702-3675. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodation in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Stella Jordan of the MPO staff at sjordan@ctps.org or call her at 857-702-3675. Next item on the agenda is introductions. I'm David Moeller, our Secretary of Fiandaca here. Jonathan, please call the roll.
Thank you. Mass DOT seat 2.
John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present today.
Thank you. Mass DOT Highway Division.
Mass DOT Highway John Romano here.
Thank you. MBTA.
Good morning. This is Allie Clayman representing Interim General Manager Gonville and the MBTA.
Thank you. Massport.
Hi, this is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
MAPC Vice Chair.
Good morning. This is Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. MBTA Advisory Board.
Good morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board.
Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Hello, Leonard Diggins Advisory Council here. Thanks.
Thank you. City of Boston, Boston Transportation Department.
I'm not seeing William Conroy.
Okay, any General maybe?
Not at the moment.
Okay, I will come back. City of Boston, BPDA.
Thank you. I'm Jim Fitzgerald with the BPDA, representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston. And I just heard from Mr. Conroy that he's having a few technical difficulties, but he is intending to log on shortly.
Okay, thanks, Jim. At large City of Everett.
Good morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DiMaria in the city of Everett.
Thank you. At large City of Newton.
Good morning, I'm David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the city of Newton.
At large Town of Arlington.
I am not seeing any representatives at the moment.
Okay. At large Town of Brookline.
Not seeing any Brookline members.
Okay. Intercore Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Ballantyne and the Intercore.
Thank you. We did hear from Austin Saganowitz that he will be late to the meeting, so we'll skip him for now. As we did hear from Dennis Giambetti, he will also be attending around 10:30 as well. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Nguyen, representing Mayor Cahill and the North Shore Task Force.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
I do not see Melissa Kontakis.
Okay. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
I don't see Jen Constable.
Okay. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
Also not seeing Peter Pelletier.
Okay. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Deposit River Regional Chamber.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the town of Norwood, representing the Trek subregion.
Thank you. I will go back to City of Boston, BTD.
Hi, Bill Conroy, representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston.
Thank you. Now we'll go to our ex officio members, Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Thank you. And Federal Transit Administration.
Not seeing any representatives.
Okay, that calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I just need to do a little housekeeping today. Item number 8, the action item on the work scope for flexible fixed route bus service will be tabled today and taken up at a later meeting. It didn't quite get ready for this agenda. So if you're interested in that, please stay tuned for a future meeting and we will be taking it up then. That's all I've got. Tegan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, everybody. So if we could go to the first slide of my report, please. I wanted to remind folks that we have a number of open positions right now that we are accepting applications for. And kind of parallel to this, one of the reasons why 2 of the positions are open is that this will be Michelle Scott's and Jonathan Church's last MPO meeting. So again, if you want to reach out to them, you can always maybe chat or say hello during the meeting. So the open positions we have is the manager of MPO activities, a new role, which is the manager of policy and planning, a manager of multimodal planning and design, which is a reformed, renamed group. It was once called the Traffic Analysis and Design Group, and we're creating more of a multimodal structure to that team and calling it multimodal planning and design. And then we are also looking for a program manager for the long range transportation plan. So we have been receiving applications for these positions, and we will be starting interviewing quite imminently. But again, wanted to ask you to please help us spread the word and do the best we can in getting a wide range of qualified applicants if we are able to do so. So thank you for your support in that. And just as a reminder as well, with Michelle Scott's departure after her, well, she'll be presenting today, but as going forward, Bradley Putnam is the interim long range transportation plan program manager. So please do reach out to him going forward if you have inquiries about the LRTP. Next slide, please. So I have a miscellaneous update today. So we have been doing some work to prepare for what could be the expiration of the open meeting law extension, which has been allowing virtual meetings to take place, which would not have been allowed under the open meeting law as it existed before the pandemic. So there is an expiration date currently set for March 31st, 2023. It could be further extended, but we feel we have to plan for what would happen if it does expire, and we are required to follow the open meeting law as it was previously and meet in person. So we have been able to reserve the transportation boardroom for MPO use starting in April through October of 2023. In advance of doing this, we knew that there were some potential conflicts with other board meetings being held in that room, but it appears that schedules have changed. And so we will be able to reserve the MPO's usual time, the first and third Thursday mornings of the month. And we have reserved that time in the transportation boardroom so that we can hold in-person meetings if we are required to do so. Next slide, please. So today's agenda, as the chair already said, we have a slight revision to the items that are on the agenda. We only have 3 action items. That will be a tip adjustment, the Title VI triennial report, and the community connections shuttle performance, a vote to give you the opportunity to choose to approve future year funding decisions for those community connections shuttle projects. And then there will be 2 presentations. First, Ethan Lapointe will give you an update on the evaluation scores for projects being considered for programming in the federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP. including projects evaluated through that Community Connections program. And then the next presentation will be Michelle Scott with her presentation on the draft long-range plan universe of roadway projects for your consideration and discussion. Next slide. So we will actually have more than the usual number of meetings in March. The next MPO meetings are scheduled for the 9th, which is next week, the 16th, and then the 30th. So that will be 4 meetings in March. Thank you all in advance for your time commitment. This is usually our busiest period for the board with the development of the TIP and UPLVP. And of course, this year we also have the long range plan, which is updated every 4 years. This is a year for all 3 documents to be updated. At the next meeting on the 9th, the likely agenda items that we will have will be discussing and endorsing transit asset management performance targets, the RTA's capital planning processes, CADA and WRTA, and then also presentations by TIP project proponents when those projects have seen significant cost increases. And we have invited folks to come and speak to the MPO board to talk about why those increases are happening. And that, Mr. Chair, is it for my report, and I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions from the members for Tegan? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment at this time? If so, please raise your hand. Stephanie Monaco.
Hi, how are you? I'm Stephanie Monaco. I work for Good Baby International on Royal Street, and I am here in support of the shuttle program. We love working with this program so much. It's been a great tool for us in terms of recruiting. We're able to open our search up to employees who live in the city or don't have cars or just prefer public transportation. These shuttles are always reliable and on time, which makes them so easy to work with. The ride sharing and using these is environmentally sustainable, which is so important to us. We love working with Karen Dumaine. She's a pleasure. Our employees always love the rider events in our cafe and the monthly challenges, and we really value this program in our organization. So we are definitely in support of this.
Thank you. Frank V, could you state your last name for the record, please?
Frank Ventimiglia, Town of Ipswich Public Works, speaking on behalf of the Gilla Road project that you'll hear about later on today. Just a little project background, since it didn't go through the regular channels that you're probably used to. The project started in 2018 as a result of a coastal vulnerability assessment that the Woods Hole Group performed for the trustees on all their coastal properties. The results indicated that a section of Gilla Road from the Crane Estate to the Crane Beach will be flooded daily by 2070. At that time, the trustees reached out to the town to see if we were interested in partnering on a project to raise that section of road to combat sea level rise and maintain access to over 500,000 annual visitors moving forward. As a result of that, the town and trustees identified a grant program through the Office of Coastal Zone Management. It's the Coastal Resiliency Grant Program. As a possible funding source, we applied for funding, and we're on the 5th year. We've received over $600,000. The goal of the project, again, is to raise the road to combat sea level rise, using soft solution for embankment stabilization methods. This project will also remove a critical tidal restriction that will create approximately 1.2 acres of new salt marsh habitat based on increased tidal inundation upstream of the culvert. And again, another nuance at this point, the project's really just hoping to get on a TIP schedule to bolster our congressionally earmarked funding applications. Since we currently have no construction funding source at this time. So that's all I have. I just wanted to get that out there, because again, I know this project is running a different course than probably most that you see.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before I call on other people, I just want to apologize for the background noise you may be hearing. They're doing construction in the offices next to me. Danielle DeMarco.
Hi, yes, sorry for that. I wanted to also just show my support for the Royale Street, the shuttle that we also benefit from greatly. So just to echo what the first person had said, I'm with Campanelli Companies and we own 250 Royale Street. It is a building at the end of the road and it is a multi-tenant office building. We truly rely on the shuttle as an amenity to our building. It has helped us land a variety of tenants and leases in the building, and it continues to be a big selling point when we have new prospective tenants. So to that end, I just wanted to show my support and let you all know that it's been instrumental in us having success leasing that building. So just wanted to pop on here and show the support for that.
Thank you. Yadira Martinez.
Good morning. My name is Kira Martinez and I'm from Boston Mutual. Also on Royal Street. Wanted to speak on behalf of the Royal Street Shuttle. Support of that funding that we received. It's been instrumental in the hiring and retention of employees, attracting and retaining talent, broader areas. It's a great tool to incentivize employees as well to come back to the office more than a couple of days a week. I will say with the current economy and how things are going, it has been difficult to want to get employees to come back more days a week. And this has been a great incentive to motivate them along with the perks program for MBTA. This also helps reduce traffic in the area along Royal Street. So very appreciative of the program, hoping that we can continue the effort of the funding. And I just wanted to show my support as well for Karen Dumaine and the NBTMA. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian McCusker.
Good morning. Brian McCusker from Point 32 Health. I'm also speaking on behalf of the Neponset Valley TMA shuttle service. We are fairly new to Royal Street. We've only been here for a couple of years, but at our previous location in Watertown, we had access to multiple public transportation stops along on Mount Auburn Street. And when we moved, the shuttle service became pivotal to maintaining our current employees as well as recruiting future employees as we employ a large number of individuals who require public transportation, and we would like to see funding for the TMA to continue. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Ostroff.
Good morning. Josh Ostroff, Director of Transportation Planning for the City of Newton. On behalf of myself and Nicole Friedman, my predecessor in this role, we appreciate the support through Community Connections for our Pneumo microtransit service and would be very grateful for continued funding. Pneumo and microtransit is critical to providing mobility options within Newton for the workforce, for seniors, for everybody that needs to get from place to place in a very distributed transportation network that is Newton. We see this as really the future of transportation that's here today. It's helping to provide equitable mobility through discounted fares available to everybody, but particularly to seniors and people with disabilities. It's something that supports our workforce. It helps to reduce congestion and emissions through a largely electrified fleet. And we're only able to do this with distributed funding sources because, like all transit, it depends on public investment as a public good. So we are seeking ways to put Pneumo on a future sound footing for revenue. That's the challenge with all transit today and all transportation, in fact. But for now, we're very grateful to the MPO and hope to earn your support for the coming year. Thank you for Nicole and myself for the attention you give to this.
Thank you. Gene Manning.
Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Gene Manning. I'm interim town planner in Canton. On behalf of the town of Canton, we just want to
voice our support and ask for the board's support for continued funding for the shuttle at Royal Street. This is a critical part of our town's infrastructure planning, part of our master plan, and also helps remove traffic from Route 138, which is highly congested. So we appreciate your consideration of this. And as you've heard from our business community, it is well utilized and will continue to be in the future. So thanks very much, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Karen Devine. Karen, are you there? I think we might have lost you, so I'll come back to you if I see your hand.
Trying.
Oh, there you go. We got you.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having a hard time with my mute. Thank you, everyone. I want to thank all of our business partners and the town of Canton for showing their support on the community connections with Royal Street Shuttle project. I hope that everyone from the MPO will vote for funding for this project. As you can see, we are located in the suburban area. We don't have access to the bus network that the urban core does have. So this is a vital tool for transportation for our region. We're going to 4 transit stations. And this is great for economic development, recruitment, and retention of employees. So I thank you all for your support.
Thank you. Brad Rawson.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. The City of Somerville is really excited to work with MPO staff, with agency partners and municipalities from all subregions on the 2024 to 2028 TIP. At this board's last meeting, several members requested that the MBTA provide a list of potential projects for MPO consideration in a timely manner to support the TIP process. I do notice, Chair, that today's agenda does not include any MBTA project lists. So I'm hoping that the board will establish a clear and reliable timeline for this crucial step in the TIP process. I'm really impressed over the course of many years that this MPO has committed itself to process improvements each year. This includes more transparent scoring. This includes the brand new Community Connections grant program that's been so important to so many different members, and we've heard some testimony already this morning about it. It also includes improved agency coordination with all of our proponents at MBTA and MassDOT. Chair, ensuring that the MBTA's regional portfolio of projects is discussed and vetted really is crucial to the region's future. And I'll note that many MBTA priorities cut across subregions and are not limited to the inner core. A great example is the well-established vision for electrified regional rail to better link gateway cities and suburban communities to the metro core. Somerville stands ready to work with all of our agency and municipal partners to work on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Any other comments from the public at this time? Seeing none. If you have a comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Derek Cravat.
Thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that the Unified Planning Work Program Committee plans to meet next on Thursday, March 16th at 1 p.m. We will be discussing the draft fiscal year 2024 UPWP universe of projects that staff has received so far through the survey and other means that was distributed. I will also be discussing a proposed amendment to the UPWP to add a planning grant that the MBTA has received that the Federal Transit Administration has asked to be amended into the work program that's related to a grant for the pilot program for transit-oriented development. So we'll be hearing more about that as well, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions for Derek? Seeing none. Jay Monty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Jay Monty here. I'm the chair of the Congestion Management Committee. Just wanted to put on folks' radar that tentatively on March 30th, we'll be having a meeting of the Congestion Management Committee. There's some exciting work that CTPS has asked this committee to have some input on with regard to roadway pricing. So that there'll be a study being worked on looking at other cities' experiences with roadway pricing and how that might apply here in the Commonwealth. The committee is short several members, so I believe we have at least 3, maybe 4 vacancies right now. So if folks are interested, I know there's some new members here on the MPO board that may not have a committee assignment. Please reach out to myself or Ryan Hicks, and we'd be happy to add you to the committee. So hopefully we'll see some of you on the 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Brian Kane.
Thanks, David. We had a A&F committee meeting this morning to continue our work on the operations plan. Today we continued our discussion on the hiring and compensation, I should say theoretical hiring and compensating of an executive director, because Tegan will be here forever, as we all know. And we advanced or started the discussion on a kind of communications framework, shall I say. So that work continues to get the operations plan moving forward. It's been a slow process, but it's been a very good process, and I'm pleased with the quality of the work that we're doing. And the next meeting is April 9th, and of course, everyone is invited to participate. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Jay or Brian? I forgot to ask after Jay was done. Seeing none, next item on the agenda is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not had a meeting since our last meeting here, but our next meeting is coming up next Wednesday, and I'm thinking that we're still going to get a look at the UPWP universe, but since that subcommittee meeting has been moved back, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that we'll also be discussing the tip. So please come join us. We're going to be having something interesting to discuss. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. Next item on the agenda is the January 26, 2023 MPO minutes. Can I get a motion in a second to approve the minutes? Please state your name for the record when making the motion. Eric Barassa.
Good morning, Eric Barassa. I'll make a motion to approve the January 26th MPO meeting minutes.
Brian Kane.
Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board, seconds that motion.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing and hearing none, Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ellie Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozas, I will come back.
Okay, I'm now able to unmute myself.
Oh, okay, sorry.
David Kozas, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
I'm O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. As we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we're tabling action item number 8. So we'll go on to action item number 9, FFY 2023-2027 tip adjustment number 3. Logan Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Logan Casey, and this presentation will be covering the content of Adjustment 3 to the current federal fiscal year 2023 to 2027 Transportation Improvement Program. If you could go to the next slide, please. And the next slide. Alrighty, so this is the third adjustment to the federal fiscal year 2003 to 2027 tip for the federal fiscal year 2023 program. Adjustment 3 proposes changes to 2 projects. These proposed changes are also available on our MPO calendar in the form of attachments. The first change is a funding source adjustment to the interstate maintenance and related work on Interstate 93 in Quincy, Milton, and Boston. The second change is a funding figure correction for Cape Ann Transportation Authority, or CATA, Revenue Vehicle Replacement Project. Moving on to adjustment changes by program. Next slide, please. Next slide. All right. So for federal fiscal years 2023 state highway revisions, the change is a funding source adjustment for interstate maintenance and related work on Interstate 93 in Quincy, Milton, Boston. The funding sources for this project have been adjusted to reflect the amount of bridge preservation and maintenance work in the contract. The overall budget of this project is going to remain the same. If you move on to the next slide. The second adjustment is for federal fiscal year 2023 transit improvement program. This change is a funding correction to CADA's revenue vehicle replacement project. The project budget has been adjusted to accurately reflect the total federal funding share that has been originally identified by the project. This change would result in a $95,000 increase to the project's budget. And then next slide, moving on to our action. With these changes, today the MPO staff requests that the board votes to endorse adjustment 3. I'll take any questions and thank you.
Thank you, Logan. Questions for Logan? Seeing none, since this is an adjustment, it does not need to go out for public review. Can I get a motion in a second to approve it as presented today? Brian Kane. I lost Brian.
Brian, you're muted.
Oh, man, I'm sorry. Brian Kane, motion to approve, please.
Excellent work by the vice chair. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, I second that motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded, Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ellie Clayman,
Ellie Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is the Title VI Triennial Report. Betsy Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I am here to ask today for the board's endorsement of the MPO's 2022 Title VI Triennial Report. At the January 19th MPO meeting, this board voted to release the report for a 30-day public comment period, which concluded on February 22nd. The Title VI Triennial Report is developed to demonstrate the MPO's compliance with Federal Transit Administration and Federal Highway Administration Title VI requirements for MPOs. Title VI is part of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin. And through this reporting, we demonstrate that the MPO does not discriminate in its practices, planning practices, activities, or programs intentionally or unintentionally, and conducts an inclusive planning process that is inclusive and provides meaningful opportunities for all people in our region. While Title VI compliance is ongoing, we regularly report our compliance efforts to MassDOT as we are a subrecipient of federal funding through them. MassDOT then reports on Title VI compliance for all state and Massachusetts MPOs to FTA and FHWA. FHWA reporting is done every year and FTA reporting every 3 years. As this is a triennial year, the report responds to both FTA and FHWA requirements. Our practice is to have a public comment period and to seek MPO endorsement in these triennial years. During the public comment period, we received 3 comment letters. All of those are posted on the calendar, as are our summary of our responses to those comments. The first is from member of the public, Scott Peterson. To summarize, the letter provided several points of feedback, included suggestions about expanding air quality analyses in the TIP and LRTP to look at additional pollutants and their impacts on Title VI populations, suggestions about conducting fair consultant hiring practices, about passing a zero tolerance policy regarding discrimination, concerns about the quality of census data that is on people with disabilities, a suggestion to clarify the Title VI complaint log, a request of clarification about the differences in Title VI reporting between the MPO and our fiduciary agent, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, and a question about how the analysis of the distribution of UPWP studies amongst MPO communities is conducted in Appendix G. The second letter is from the Conservation Law Foundation. It provides 3 main points of feedback. The first is to consider a negative value for the thresholds used in our long-range transportation plan, disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis, to actively reduce existing transportation disparities for people of color and people with low incomes. The second suggestion is a concern that the implementation of the MPO's new web translation service Localize provides translations in fewer languages than the current Google translation widget that Localize is replacing. And the third is a request that the MPO clarify metrics used to calculate the modeling and forecasting error that is used in the MPO's disparate impact and disproportionate burden analysis, and make that process more transparent to the public. The final comment letter is from MPO board member Lynn Diggins, who conveyed his appreciation of the quality of the design and the aesthetics of the report, and makes a suggestion to improve the contrast in colors in one of the graphs of the report. As always, we appreciate the time and thought that all commenters put into their letters. As I mentioned, we responded to each commenter and have reposted the summary of those responses on our calendar. I'm happy to take any questions regarding those comments or the report itself, and ask for the board to vote to endorse the 2022 Title 6 triennial report. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Questions for Betsy from the members? Seeing and hearing none, can I get a motion in a second to approve as presented today? Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Barassa, I'll make a motion to approve, to endorse the Title VI triennial report.
Thank you. Lynn Diggins.
Second that motion, Leonard Diggins.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll, Jonathan.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next item on the agenda is the Community Connections Shuttle's performance data, and it's an action item. Ethan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan Lapointe. This presentation will cover the Royal Street and Newton in Motion, or NUMO, shuttle operations. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with an update on the ridership for these shuttles between October 2021 through January 2023, which is the month where staff have the most up-to-date ridership actuals. The additional purpose of this presentation will be, if we move on to the next slide, to wrap up with a vote regarding the continued funding authorization for federal fiscal year 2023 for shuttle operations. This presentation will start with a review on the Community Connections funding levels for fiscal year 2024 and 5 to give an idea of what these shuttle operations will look like going forward. And we will then break down the shuttle performance individually for the Royal Street shuttle and also the Newton in Motion expansion performance. If we move on to the next slide, in advance of this presentation today, staff provided a table attached for the calendar invitation, which is for the federal fiscal years 2024 to 2028 shuttle analyses. This table shows the full extent of the data that was used to drive the analysis performed by staff and includes detailed project descriptions, scheduling information, month-to-month ridership figures, and also cost figures by month and by year. The data in this table and what really drives the actuals of this presentation, as stated, represents the totality of available data between October 2021 and January 2023, in addition to projections from February 2023 out into the end of federal fiscal year 2024. This table also includes additional explanations regarding the methodology for how those projections were made, and also provides additional detail, including when trips may be performed, the number of average riders per day, which is not something that appears in this report, but I will reference individually, and also additional information is needed. If we move on to the next slide and the one after that, can provide a quick overview on the number of current shuttle projects being funded in the fiscal years 2023 to 27 TIP. This slide has appeared previously. There are 8 projects in the current 23 to 27 TIP that represent some form of shuttle pilot program funding within the Community Connections program. The 2 projects that are being referred to today represent 3 line items of these 8. This includes Canton's Royal Street Shuttle, which we've heard support for at the start of this meeting, and also Newton's Newton in Motion Shuttle, again, where we've heard prior comments earlier in this meeting. Newton in Motion is represented by 2 line items. Royal Street's last year of funding in the current TIP is federal fiscal year 2024, whereas NUMO's line item provides additional continued funding all the way until 2025. The 2025 portion is not going to be present in this analysis, but may be discussed in the future. With consideration for all shuttle projects that have been funded as part of previous TIPs, and therefore being carried forward for consideration for additional funding into the new TIP and in federal fiscal year 2023, there is only $641,000 remaining in federal fiscal year 2024 to fund any new community connections projects. There is $1.07 million remaining in 2025 after accounting for the funding obligations for continued shuttle funding. This will have an impact on the presentation I'll be presenting on next regarding TIP project scoring, but the amount of funding remaining for balance for community connections reflects the amount of remaining funding availability based on the MPO's approval of a $2.5 million set aside for the program. We move on to the next slide and dig more into the details, starting with the Royal Street Shuttle. The Royal Street Shuttle was initially funded in the fiscal year 2022 application round for Community Connections shuttles back in the 22 to 26 TIP. However, this project's history goes back a bit further to late 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic, and the development of what back then was being referred to as the Workforce Transit Grants Program. When this project was initially evaluated, a great deal of the data regarding its budget need of a total of $534,820 from MPO contributions, and also therefore its ridership projections reflected pre-COVID demand conditions, not only regarding individual riders, but also economic development along the service corridors. What remains, however, is that the total service area not only includes Canton and the Royal Street corridor, but also the connections that it makes to transit facilities in Boston, Canton, Quincy, and Westwood, namely in the form of MBTA Red Line stations and commuter rail stations. The University Avenue corridor, which is present in Westwood, provides additional intermodal connections not only to University Avenue and Park, but also by extension, the Route 128 MBTA commuter rail and Amtrak station. When this project was initially evaluated in the fiscal year 2022 application round for community connections, it scored 51 out of 134 points. Important thing to note there is that the scoring framework that this project was evaluated under is no longer in place going forward for any new shuttle projects. If we move on to the next slide, I can go into a little bit more detail regarding the actual operations of the Royal Street Shuttle. The Royal Street Shuttle is really 2 shuttles that operate under the same banner. To reflect the shuttle's focus on workforce transportation, these 2 lines, the Red Line and commuter rail shuttles, operate on weekdays only, namely approximately 20 days a month, and conduct approximately 17 trips per day round trip across the 2 lines. There are 4 trips that depart in the morning for Red, with 3 back in the evening, targeting commuting patterns. The commuter rail service has 5 shuttles inbound to Royal Street in the morning, and then 5 outbound towards Route 128 commuter rail in the afternoon and evening. I should also mention that, again, given how these ridership estimates emerged before the pandemic, The number of shuttles that this service is operating reflects in part the availability of vehicles, personnel, and demand. When the shuttle was first applied for, there was an initial scheduling projection of 20 daily trips that were proposed, namely the shortage falling on the Red Line connection side of the project. So again, in addition to less ridership, there's also a lower number of total trips being conducted per day due to constraints on the operations side. If we move on to the next slide, I have provided a summary table that summarizes some of the data found in the attachment for this meeting. This table reflects the total amount of funding figures and performance data by year, whereas the attachment breaks it out by month for a little bit more of a deeper dive. The MPO's contribution to the Royal Street Shuttle has ranged from approximately 2/3 to under 1/2 of the total estimated budget for shuttle operations, with the remainder of the contribution supported by the town of Canton and critically a variety of private firms in the Royal Street corridor like Boston Mutual Life Insurance Company and Point 32 Health. Point 32 Health refers to the new name for the recently merged Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts Health providers. There are also additional private partners, some of whom we've heard from earlier in this presentation. Many of these firms work with the town of Canton to really create what is a public-private partnership for the shuttle, which makes it a fairly unique workforce transit project. The year that's highlighted in green here and the focus of the performance data to review today represents fiscal year 2023, which is the funding authorization up for a vote. On the next slide, we will better visualize the ridership trends for this shuttle, but for this year, there's a projected MPO contribution of $177,000. The initial projected monthly, oh, can we go back one slide? I'm sorry, I may have misspoken. The initial projected monthly ridership for fiscal year 2023 was 10,000 users, whereas the actuals for the shuttle illustrate 234. In addition, there are also an average trend of annual ridership of 2,800 riders per year. This results in an average cost per ride to the MPO of $63 per rider and an overall cost per rider when accounting for the private contributions from business partners on the corridor of $121.94 per rider. This figure, as illustrated by the table, has declined since 2022 and is projected to continue declining into federal fiscal year 2024. If we move on to the next slide, we can illustrate the monthly ridership for the shuttle since its start in October 2021 into the January 2023 actuals. Beyond January 2023, staff have incorporated an 11.3% year-over-year increase to project ridership out to the close of September 2024. This year-over-year increase is a conservative estimate based on historic trend data. The historic trends for average month-to-month ridership increases for the past 6 months have been an increase of 5.65% in ridership for each month. Therefore, this represents approximately a 1/6 trend allocation versus what more recent history shows. So it is fairly conservative. You can find the data that supports this analysis and further detail on what's driving that projection in the attached file. Applying a year-over-year estimate in this fashion to this shuttle also helps to reflect the seasonal variability of the shuttle, particularly with regard to how this shuttle operates in holiday months where, being a workforce shuttle, it does not operate on as many days, and there may also be less ridership due to increases in paid time off. The average rate of daily ridership for the shuttle since October 2021 and up to present day has averaged approximately 9 riders a day. That being said, that figure incorporates the lower ridership rates witnessed between October 2021 and April 2022. It was not until April 2022 that the second line, the commuter rail line, was introduced into the system, and therefore the daily ridership figures are anchored a little bit by those earlier months. Following the adoption of the commuter rail shuttle, ridership increased in kind. There was also a lagging return to office in the form of, and also vacancy rates, which also tempered the demand for the service. This is reflected in the next slide, which shows the number of unique riders by month for the shuttle. This graph, unlike the prior one, does not include projections of beyond the actuals range for unique ridership beyond January 2023. The amount of peak unique monthly ridership for the shuttle was achieved at 43 unique monthly users in September 2022. Unique riders in this case referring to unique individuals using this service, how many people one by one rather than repeat riders. The number of unique riders by month for this shuttle follows the general trend and framework of Royal Street Shuttle's ridership growth over previous months. If we move on to the next slide, we can talk about a different shuttle with different movements, which is the Newton in Motion shuttle service. Unlike the the Royal Street project, NUMO was initially funded in the federal fiscal year 2023 application round. However, the NUMO line item being discussed today is for the NUMO service expansion, which builds upon an existing federal fiscal year 2021 funded project under project ID S10784, the Newton Microtransit Service. The service expansion, or rather that initial project, represented a full city service area that would have been achieved in October 2021 and was initially proposed by Newton, that is a typo on the slide, with a total budget of $890,574. For purposes of the analysis provided in advance of this project, and to show a comprehensive overview of what the finances look like here, as far as performance breakdown, the funding line items between the 2021 funded project and 2023 were consolidated into one, but I'll get to that later. When this project was funded in the 23 application round, it obtained a score of 87 out of 100 points. And because it was funded initially in 2023, the service expansion project is projected to continue its funding into 2025. For additional detail on this project, the service expansion largely focused on additional connections for this on-demand shuttle service to primary commuter and transit destinations in adjacent municipalities, including Waltham, Watertown, Boston, Brookline, Needham, Wellesley, and Weston. If we go on to the next slide, NUMO operates a fairly unique type of service that runs daily from 7:30 in the morning to 6 p.m. NUMO is a microtransit oriented service which does not operate on fixed routes, and instead, through its partnership with VIA, which is the contractor for the service, focuses on a dynamic routing system such that when a user orders a ride, their ride may be rerouted to provide more of a demand response oriented service. The service for NUMO has increased since its initial inception several years ago and has now achieved a total overall fleet of 10 vehicles, which is higher than where it initially started. This will be key when we get to the ridership data later in this presentation to illustrate a major driver of this shuttle's growth. If we move on to the next slide, we can dig deeper onto the operations. By year, the total budget for the NUMO project has been 1.09, 1.27, and $1.45 million between federal fiscal years 2022 to 24. That is the total budget for the city of Newton, of which the MPO's contribution has amounted to $275,000, $564,600, and $268,000 in 2024. Again, in 2022 and 3, this is a consolidated representation of the two different NUMO line items. However, the ridership figures for both reflect the same. If one looks at the annual monthly ridership average for those years, there is a projected increase in ridership from the federal fiscal 23 actuals of 5,948 to 5,997. However, this does not reflect the actuals trend, which we'll be able to visualize a little bit better a little bit later. The cost per rider to the MPO for federal fiscal year 2023 is $7.91 per rider, which is higher than the previous year, but is also higher than next year's projected amount of $3.73 per rider. Again, this is due in part to the fact that this shuttle is being funded through two separate line items. If we go on to the next slide, we can illustrate what the ridership projections month by month, which again are detailed in the handout in advance of this presentation, look like. As you can see, the data for the NUMO shuttle has increased dramatically since the start of October 2021 into the actuals for January 2023. The, for lack of a better term, flat line that you are seeing beyond January 23 does not reflect what the trend data shows for NUMO's growth. That is a 6-month rolling average projected out from January 2023 to illustrate a rough benchmark of 6,000 riders per month. That being said, the first 4 months of 2023 have marked ridership above 6,000, including additional achievements in approximately 6,400 and 6,500 riders per month. This is in large part because NUMO's ridership growth as a demand response service is largely constrained by its ability to meet demand. As demand increases because of service expansions, financed through these MPO line items, and also through the addition of additional vehicles to its fleet, it can access more riders and increase its average monthly ridership. In January 2023, NUMO achieved a peak ridership of approximately 6,500 users, which has been the highest that the service has achieved since its inception. This ridership trend continues to grow for the service, particularly as expansion continues. In similar fashion to the approximately 6,500 rides per month, if we go into the next slide, we can again see the unique ridership. NUMO enjoys strong unique ridership by month, starting in October 2021, and again peaking in January 2023. Again, we're relying on the 6-month rolling average here to project out beyond January 2023. So this does not reflect any additional increases in demand, service area expansion, fleet procurement, etc., that may increase beyond this conservative estimate. The peak ridership for NUMO, given recent monthly averages, has been in excess of 1,200 unique riders by month for the service, and generally reflects its unique nature of being a demand response service with a very broad net. With that, I would like to move on to any discussion or questions regarding the information presented here today and any areas of clarification.
Questions from MPO members? David Moses.
Okay, Ethan, thanks for the presentations. I'm still not clear why only 2 services are being presented here. There's other shuttles that are requesting funding, right? Does it mean that there's no concerns with those shuttles, or am I missing something? It seems that you know, obviously, really, what's presented are 2 very different types of services. One fixed route and one demand response, right? So it's not comparing apples to apples. Maybe that's part of the point. I'm not sure, but really, what about the other shuttles that are requesting funding?
Yeah, thank you, David. If we can go back a few slides to that slide that showed all 8 of the line items, probably more than a few. Just to go into detail here, the 2 shuttles that were discussed today represent, again, only 3 of the total 8 line items. Yeah, here we go. As you can see from this table, about half of the overall shuttles are operated by a regional transit authority. The remaining 2 that are municipal, which are the Stoneham Shuttle Service and the Pleasant Street Shuttle Service expansion project, have not yet commenced their expansions or their operations as of yet. I think some folks at MassDOT may be able to provide additional detail with regard to the invoicing and available data. I think Derek has his hand up.
Derek?
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ethan's correct on that. And also just to clarify, this is a request. The presentations and what we've been asked by the Federal Highway Administration is to provide an indication of MPO support for year 2 of these 2 projects. So these 2 projects, Newton and Canton, were the only 2 shuttles that began in fiscal year 2022, and year 2 of them is in fiscal year 2023. The other shuttles, I believe the first year of funding was fiscal year 2023. And so next year we would, likely be doing the same process for all those other shuttles. But this is a request for year 2 funding, and these 2 projects were the only ones that started in fiscal year 2022, of which fiscal year 23 represents year 2 funding. So just wanted to clarify that as well.
Thank you, Derek. Brian Kane.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think I think we're okay with this. I think I'm okay with this, is what I should say. I don't necessarily love these private shuttles, but as I look at the math on the Royal Street one, it's doing kind of what we expected it to do. The subsidy from the MPO is going down year over year. I'm very happy to hear that there are employer contributions. We heard during public comment how important employers believe this is, and it seems like they're backing that up with their dollars, which is really important. And it also seems like it's on track after year 3 to be subsidized by those businesses or other non-Boston Region MPO funds, which is the point, I think, of these programs. So, you know, we heard it's $100 a person subsidy. That's actually not too crazy for some T bus routes, believe it or not. I think that given the town of Canton support, the TMA support, and the support of the businesses in the area, there is a commitment to this in the area. I guess I would hope that we can get some further commitments for what's going to happen in year 4. If it's just going to get cut off and stopped, I'd rather just stop it now, frankly. But if there is a commitment from folks and proponents to continue it, absolutely. But I think we should keep going. And just on the Newton one, I think it's a real success, and hats off to the city for what it's doing, especially with respect to people with disabilities. I think it's been a real win, and has taken some pressure off of the ride for the MBTA, which is a huge cost center, which you know, that's about $85 a trip subsidized. So I think we're doing a little better in Newton. So I plan to support this and would encourage my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. And first of all, Ethan, I just want to say thank you for putting this together. This is a much clearer understanding of everything based on the last presentation. So thank you so much. Could we go back to the just the chart that had all of the years for the Royal Street shuttle? I just have a question about this chart. The fiscal 23 and 24 for the monthly ridership actuals and trends. That's just are those numbers for 23 and 20 and 24 the trends, or is that what the is that what they is sort of the renewed goal for the program?
I'm sorry, Eric. I think my internet connection is starting to cut out for some reason. Give me one moment.
Yeah, I was just wondering, were those numbers is that just the trend line, or were those numbers that the TMA provided to you as sort of like at you sort of renewed, you know, goal projection or estimate?
Ethan?
No,
Yeah, I'd like to apologize real quick. My internet connection on my end is failing. So.
But we can hear you, and presumably you heard Eric's question.
Oh, perfect. Okay, you're all frozen on my screen.
Yeah,
I
we can hear
apologize
you.
for that.
It's
So
okay.
yes, if I understood.
We can hear you, yeah. So Eric's question was the 234 and the 259. Is the 234 actuals, or is it some kind of combination of actuals and trend? And is the 259 just a trend based on previous actuals and projected growth? I think, Eric, is your question.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes, I heard it that time. I apologize for that.
No worries.
with regard to that question, so the 2023 component represents a combination of actuals between the start of fiscal year 2023 being October 22 into January 23, and then projects actuals out beyond that using that 11.3% year-over-year increase from the prior year. Given the prior year, I should also mention, because this is a good question, and you may see this on the handout, for the February 22 and through April 22 had ridership that did not account for the operation of the commuter rail line, that those 3 months are also using a 6-month rolling average versus the 11.3%. The 2024 figures represents that average rate of increase of 11.3% year over year for each prior year, and then averaged out to come to 259. It's a little bit more clear on the actual sheet.
I guess what I would say is, I mean, my sense is last year, I mean, you know, all of this is impacted, right, by COVID and kind of return to work. And none of us can predict how, you know, the future of hybrid working and back into office working is kind of unfolding. I think last year was, you know, the sort of the first kind of year after the pandemic where things are getting, you know, kind of settled, and now we're kind of getting into like the new normal, and then 24 we're going to see. So I feel like using that sort of trend based on the growth of ridership in 22 might be low, might be kind of a lower projection than hopefully what 24 is. So that's just the point I'm trying to understand, that this is sort of a trend line based on data from 2022 as opposed to actual goals that the TMA provided. So thank you. That answers my question.
Tom O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really good report here. Very helpful. I submitted a letter on behalf of the chamber in support of the Royal Street Shuttle, but also with my TRIC representative hat on, I also wanted to express my support for continued funding for this. Yeah, as Eric said, COVID has had an impact. I think a lot of these companies that we've heard from today are trying to entice their employees to come back to work, and to have this as a tool to do that is really important. And I think as they continue to bring folks back, you're going to see these numbers rise accordingly. So I think for us to stop funding something like at this point would really send a bad message. So strongly support it.
Thank you, Tom. Kim Miller.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Ethan, for this presentation. I have actually a couple of questions about. Can you put back the table that shows the schedule and the daily ridership for the Royal Street Shuttle? No, the table that showing the.
It's a graph showing daily ridership.
Yeah.
There you go.
No.
No.
The part of the table that shows the monthly ridership and the cost per rider and that.
Oh, wasn't that it? Wait, wasn't that it?
Well, no. I'm looking at what was in the presentation. Was in the. I downloaded a copy of the table. I had the route. It had the schedule on it, and at the bottom there was a table that showed the daily.
Ethan, the first table. The first table, Ethan, that shows the keep going backwards. Keep going. That one, Ken?
This one, yes. Thank you very much, David. I just as a question, if you could focus on the bottom there. So when you say ridership, you're talking about actual passenger trips, right? Not riders per se. So just to be clear, so for for January of 2023, there were 264 total passenger trips during the month. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, it would be very helpful if you could say passenger trips, right? Because when you say riders, that can be confusing with a person as opposed to a trip. So okay, so I just want to make sure I understand that. So there are 264 passenger trips per month. So say there's a 20 service days per month, right? It's only weekday service. That means that you divide that by 20. So there are 30, so let's just say there are 14 passenger trips per day. That means, presuming people go both ways, that means there are 7 people using it per day. Is that right? Am I getting that correct?
Based on the daily ridership data that I was provided, that's accurate. The average is about 8.7 riders, which rounds up to roughly 9 riders.
9 people per day, or 9 passenger trips per day?
People.
So that means there would be 18 passenger trips per day.
I believe it's passenger trips. I think it's individuals per shuttle, so passenger trips in that case.
So that would be 9.
Apologies
So
for my
means,
terminology.
well, let's just give the benefit of the doubt. They have more people. Let's just say. So I just think it would be helpful if you were more specific in the terminology that you use on these tables, and also I do think it's extremely helpful if you actually showed, because monthly ridership is meaningless. It's hard to compare that to anything. I think a daily ridership or daily number of passenger trips and riderships would be helpful, because then that can be compared to the number of actual bus trips that you're running. So for example, if you only have 9 riders per day, but you're running 17 bus trips a day, you have at least half of your bus trips with nobody on them. So I think it would also be helpful to see the distribution of riders and passenger trips by day of week. As you know now, it's very different. People are coming into the office Tuesdays and Thursdays and not coming in on Mondays and Fridays. So I think the distribution by day of week would also be helpful to see. So just make sure I understand. When you say cost per rider, just looking at that first line for 2023, that's really cost per passenger trip, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that means if one person takes it each way, in one way in the morning and back, that cost is actually double that for that person that day. Is that correct?
Based on the math, yes.
Okay, so that means that for that day, the MPO is paying $110 for that person, and the total cost would be over $200 for that person for that day if they go back and forth on the day. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, which I think is partially reflected by the unique riders.
I understand it. So I think the daily passenger trips and using specific terminology would be helpful. Also, I just want to make so that was helpful. I just want to make another couple of things. The whole point of the CMAQ program is to be seed money for, as Brian pointed out, for basically seed money for services that can ultimately stand on their own after the subsidy is over. And also there needs to be an air quality. This is a federal regulation, is required to be an air quality benefit for the service. So in addition to this information, we will be seeking information on revised air quality calculations moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from MPO members? Seeing none, we need a motion. I think we should take them one at a time, okay? Just in case there's any distinction between the two in people's minds. So can I get a motion to approve second-year funding for the Royale Street Shuttle? And a second, please state your name for the record. Tom O'Rourke.
I will make that motion.
Brian King.
Brian Kane seconds.
Motion having been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller.
So I'm going to vote yes, but we're going to do this again next year. And ridership, like Brian, I was pleased to hear all the people come and support this. That's very important. But people need to get people on this shuttle because, to Ken's point, there are shuttles that are running empty. So either more people need to get on, or the TMA needs to look at their schedule and figure out whether they need to run so many shuttles. But I'm voting yes. I think we should give this one another year to grow its ridership. So yes.
Thank you. John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald, Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Told Janice Giambetti, Janice Giambetti arrived earlier, David, so I'd like to call him for the role.
Sure.
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald has raised his hand. I will go back to Jim.
Thank you. I couldn't seem to unmute, but Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second to approve second-year funding for the NUMO shuttle service expansion project? David Kozis.
I'll make that motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Motion having been made and seconded. Jonathan, please call the roll.
David Moeller,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Ally Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Bill Conroy,
Bill Conroy, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
and Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Hey, Ethan, next year when we do this, I need you to give us ridership figures just for the NUMO expansion. Because I think when you give us joint ridership figures, you're taking credit for a shuttle that's up and running and providing it to you're spreading out the benefit across two shuttles or a single shuttle, two projects that may be distorting the actual numbers. Okay, just for next year.
Yeah, of course. I'll work with your team to get those figures.
Thank you. Next item is a discussion of the 2024-28 presentation of final tip project scores. You again, Ethan, go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you, everybody. So continuing with my presentations this morning and hopefully with more internet stability this time, this presentation will begin with a presentation discussion of the evaluation scores for projects that were applied for the federal fiscal year 2024 to 28 TIP. This also includes projects that were evaluated through the MPO's Community Connections program. And as part of that part of the presentation, my colleague Logan Casey will be covering the Community Connections projects. So with today's presentation, we will start with a summary of the 2024 to 28 TIP development timeline, the results on project scores for projects applied for the TIP, any next steps regarding the programming of projects for the TIP, namely in the form of the programming scenarios, which will be presented at MPO board meetings on the 16th and at the end of this month, and also a discussion on any of the projects that were presented here today. If we move on to the next slide, in advance of this presentation, there were two resources posted for today. The first are descriptions of newly scored projects, which provide a full narrative overview of each project in a document format, including project summary, budget estimates, relative overview on project scoring, and a map to provide additional context as far as where that project is located. For additional detail on how a TIP project scored, there was also a table posted for the TIP project scoring summary. The TIP project scoring summary includes breakouts for not only how the project scored on the aggregate on a 100-point scale, but also how it satisfied each of the 6 subcategories of scoring criteria. These 6 subcategories reflect the MPO's vision, goals, and objectives. I should also add that as far as cost efficacy, for projects not in the Community Connections program, there is also a column that illustrates the cost per mile for these projects. I should mention as well that there are some bridge projects included in the list presented today, which may have artificially high cost per miles because of their narrow length. For the Community Connections projects, there's an estimated cost per rider instead. If we move on to the next slide, we can go over some goals for today's discussion. Today's discussion will commence with a review of evaluation scores and other key details about the projects that are under consideration for funding for this year. In previous MPO board presentations, the board was presented not only with the overall funding outlook financially for the MPO, any increases in fiscal year 27 and 8 as a result of the grant anticipatory notes payments ceasing temporarily, or GANs, and also a discussion of initial preferences for funding any new projects that may help to inform the scenario development process, which will start at the March 16th MPO meeting. Scenario development in this case refers to selecting which projects will be programmed for construction funding within the TIP. If we go on to the next slide and the one after, we can contextualize this discussion within the TIP's development timeline. That red box is basically what says we are here presenting final scores to the MPO. This is the culmination of over a month of project applications, which commenced in earnest in early and mid-November, November 7th for Community Connections and November 15th for other TIP investment programs, and concluding at the end of December. This also comes after a presentation on project readiness updates to the MPO following the February 8th TIP readiness days, and also updates on project financials. And again, draft scenarios will be presented to the MPO on the 16th. If we move on to the next slide, we can really get into the meat of this presentation, which are the project scoring results. So this year, while there are fewer projects being scored this year than last year, of which there were 25, unlike last year, the vast majority of projects being scored are new projects. There are 19 projects that were scored for this TIP cycle, 18 of which were new and 1 of which was returning from last year. I should also note that the project that is returning from last year saw a significant change in scope, so it's similarly somewhat of a new project. For a distribution across investment programs, 11 of the projects that were applied for were Community Connections, 5 for Complete Streets, 1 for intersection improvements, and 2 for the Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections program. Based on project readiness and the results of the TIP readiness days, where there was also discussion between MPO staff and MassDOT personnel, including highway districts, regarding project readiness, most of these new projects that were applied for may be primarily ready in federal fiscal years 2028. If we move on to the next slide, we have a key consideration for project policies. This is the 25% design threshold requirement, which will significantly impact project funding decisions this year. Only 2 of the projects that were applied this year have fully completed a 25% design submission to MassDOT. There are, however, several PRC approved or Project Review Committee approved projects that have 25% designs, or designs that are more mature than 25%, that are still waiting on MassDOT approval. The MPO will need to decide how flexible that it chooses to be with any projects that are not yet at MassDOT's review threshold. One of the key results and discussion points with regard to the TIP project cost change committee was flexibility in policy implementation regarding this 25% design threshold and certainty on project readiness. In similar fashion, if we go on to the next slide, we have a discussion regarding notes on project scores. As mentioned earlier in the shuttle presentation, this is the third TIP cycle that is using a new criteria set endorsed in October 2020. Unlike previous application rounds, all scores here appear on a 100-point scale versus a previous 134, and scores are not compared across different investment programs. The scoring criteria, what this means really, for a complete streets project is different from a bicycle and pedestrian network connections project, and therefore they are not exactly like to like. Project proponents have been given an opportunity to review scores and have been given an opportunity to provide feedback which may adjust scores. This feedback in exchange is ongoing. In advance of the March 9th MPO meeting, if there are any tweaks to project scores that are presented today, between now and then, those changes and adjustments will also be made available to the board so they are aware. All of these changes will be made available well in advance of the start of programming scenario discussions. The project status for each of the projects that will be discussed going forward is included where applicable, including project review committee approval designations, 25% design submissions, and whether those submissions have been fully reviewed and are approved or rejected. And I should note that the statuses presented here reflect MassDOT's current designation for that project within the project info system. Again, some municipalities may state that they are currently at 100% design internally, but a full review of that design has not yet been achieved. Now, if we move on, we can start with two projects within the Bicycle Network and Pedestrian Connections Program. First off, on the next slide is the Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway. As the name implies, the proponent for this project is the City of Malden with a request for $3.25 million to construct an extended shared use path that not only ties into the Northern Strand Community Trail, but also incorporates multimodal connections to the Malden Center and Oak Grove MBTA Orange Line and commuter rail stations. This project's main focus is on providing safe, dedicated shared use path connections for cyclists and pedestrians. Within the limits of this project, which range from a variety of local streets and also connections through local parks and open space, only 25% of the current project area currently has bicycle accommodations that are provided. The rest of the project area does not have bicycle accommodations. In addition, there are also sections where sidewalks may be absent or are currently in areas that are not ADA compliant or are in poor condition. As a bicycle network and pedestrian connections project, this project's key focus is on providing safe multimodal connectivity between not only key transit destinations, but also commercial districts within downtown Malden. Another key item to mention with regard to this project's regional significance is that the Spot Pond Brook Greenway is identified as part of the Mystic River Greenway project, which is a more regional connection of various bicycle facilities. The status on this project has it designated as Project Review Committee approved. At this time, the municipality is actively working with the consultant to bring the project to 25% design and to present it to MassDOT, and is currently working on producing right-of-way plans for submission to MassDOT District 4 for their review. We move on to the next slide. We have the second of the bicycle and network pedestrian projects. As you'll see from this project, the score is listed as TBD. For this year's application round, there were two projects, the next one, which we will get to, which had been applied for following the closure of project applications in late December. These two projects are currently actively being scored as staff focused on the projects that were applied for during the designated application window first, before moving on to this one. That being said, this project is Natick's Cochituate Rail Trail Extension. This project's request is a $6.69 million project to construct a multimodal separated bridge between the terminus of the existing Cochituate Rail Trail, which is at approximately Mechanic Street in Natick, into the new Natick Commuter Rail Station project, which is actively being worked on by the MBTA. This multi-use bridge will connect the rail trail's current terminus into that rail station and effectively complete this section of the Cochituate Rail Trail. Furthermore, this project includes coordination not only with the MBTA as part of the Natick Center, the Natick Center Station project, but also an ongoing MassDOT project along Route 27 to provide for additional bicycle facilities such that it may access the Natick Center commercial and residential district. This district has a significant amount of employment opportunities, affordable housing, and this project has also received letters of support from the State Senate delegation, local representatives, and also the Natick Cultural Center. This project is currently at a 25% design received by MassDOT as of November 21st of last year, and would commence following the completion of the Route 27 paving project and also the completion of the Natick commuter rail station on the Worcester line. If we go on to the next slide for the complete streets projects, of which we have 5. Starting off for this investment program, there are the Bellingham roadway rehabilitation of Route 126, Hartford Road, project ID 612963. The funding request for this project is $10.95 million with a score of 51.8 out of 100. I will also mention that this project score does not currently reflect any of the feedback received from project proponents, as do most of the subsequent complete streets projects that will be presented today, and is currently at PRC approval with designs currently in development and conceptual designs and functional design reports provided to staff for thorough review. This project is a complete streets project that provides for full bilateral sidewalks throughout the project area. It's important to note that this project provides connectivity to local schools and areas that currently do not have sidewalks on both sides of the roadway, in addition to connectivity for various shopping centers south of the project limit near North Bellingham Cemetery. Key to this project are also the installation and upgrades to signals at the Maple Street intersection and Pearl Street intersection, including the installation of one new signal. There is a bridge at the northern terminus of the project limit, which is the town of Medway, which will include widening of that bridge, which currently facilitates the Hopping Pond Brook underneath, to accommodate sidewalks and bicycle lanes and provide for potential regional connectivity into any multimodal improvements within the town of Medway. The project itself, as a roadway rehabilitation project, not only brings that bridge in a state of good repair, but also the roadway itself, and includes additional safety improvements for all users and shared use paths for bicycles and bicycle lanes. If we move on to the next project, we have the second project, which was submitted after the application deadline closed, and therefore a complete score is not yet available. This is the City of Boston's request for funding for bridge preservation on the Cambridge Street Bridge over MBTA tracks at Sullivan Square. These tracks not only facilitate the Orange Line and commuter rail, but also Amtrak service and bus service moving westward along Cambridge Street into Somerville and vice versa at Sullivan Square. This project's current status within project info is listed as PRC approved. However, in order to evaluate this project, the City of Boston provided staff with a 100% design report that was completed in April 2022. This project's main focus is on a deck replacement and joint repairs for this city-owned structure over the MBTA's Orange Line, commuter rail, and also underneath Interstate 93. This bridge is one of the 34, I believe, bridges in the state that is an NHS structure, but is not owned by MassDOT. Again, it is owned by the City of Boston, and it provides for safe bicycle lanes and a bus lane westbound, increasing the capacity of the roadway. While this is a state of good repair project, it is largely not only intended to improve safe multimodal accessibility and regional transit connectivity for buses between Boston and Somerville, but critically, this project is located just south along the rail alignment from the Mystic Avenue and Moffa Way bridges, and it is also near to the new Rutherford Avenue and McGrath Highway projects in terms of construction routes. This project will be timed to avoid any impacts on nearby major projects, and bringing this bridge into a state of good repair may limit the possibility of potential closures or load postings that could hinder construction coordination. Moving on to the third project, which we heard support from earlier from municipal staff, is Ipswich's Argilla Roadway Reconstruction and Adaptation Project. This project spans along Argilla Road from the Crane Estate to Crane Beach in the community of Ipswich and scored 37.1 out of 100 points. This project's request is for $5.5 million and is currently listed at PRC approval. This project's main focus is largely on roadway reconstruction and elevation for coastal flooding adaptation. If any have ever driven this road, they would know that it is largely constrained on either side within its current right-of-way by sensitive natural wetlands and salt marshes along each side. This project takes the existing culvert over the Ipswich River and widens it to accommodate additional additional flows from coastal or riverine flooding, and installs 2 new culverts to apply new drainage systems. The project will also remove legacy infrastructure, including an old weir, that are hindering the ability of the local wetlands to actually capture floodwaters during storm surge events, and elevating the roadway to make sure that the road remains accessible even when there is currently sunny day flooding during king tides. Because of the sensitive natural areas on either side of this roadway, the primary focus here is on adaptation and resiliency. Because sidewalks and bicycle lanes cannot be provided without widening the roadway's footprint within sensitive wetlands, the project's score largely reflects its improvements to resiliency, but given scoring criteria's focus on multimodal improvements, that is why this project score seems to be somewhat low. That being said, the project does stabilize the roadway shoulder to make sure that any pedestrians that may have to use the road's shoulder have at least a somewhat wider, more safe, accessible location to access the road. In terms of transit as well, while this area is in more of a recreational zone, Argilla Road supports travel by the Cape Ann Transportation Authority's Ipswich and Essex Explorer, which provides connections to Crane Beach on the eastern terminus of this roadway. If you're looking at the map right now for this project on screen, that eastern terminus and the intersection there is effectively for the ticket booths to access Crane Beach. The stabilization and widening of the roadway will not only provide safer access for pedestrians, but is also intended to reduce erosion along the corridor and also will include native plantings to further facilitate not only natural resiliency, but also biodiversity in the project area. The next project is our returning project from last year, although it is returning with some significant adjustments. This is Wakefield's Envision Wakefield Main Street Improvements Project. I will mention real quick that the project ID for this project is 610545 based on when it was applied for. Because of the scope changes to this project, which from last year, it has been assigned a new project ID, but the scope of work remains the same. The project proponent in this case is the town of Wakefield with a request for $16.58 million, which is down from last year. Last year was approximately 26 million with a score of 61.8. Last year, the score was approximately 48.1. The current status of this project is PRC approved because of the significant changes in the scope of work, and therefore a new design must be submitted. However, designs and conceptual work are currently underway between the town and its consultant of VHB. This project is primarily a roadway resurfacing, median and turn signal improvement project that focuses most importantly on multimodal enhancements along Wakefield's key commercial, residential, and transit district. This project will not only resurface the roadway, but provide for additional pedestrian islands and medians to calm traffic. It provides for turn and signal improvements at major intersections, not only to facilitate traffic safety for automobile users, but also improve the turn geometry for nearby emergency response vehicles, including the local fire station, to limit response times to nearby accidents. Key to this project is the introduction of a full shared use path and parking reconfiguration along Main Street. This includes a partial closure of Lower Common Street to through traffic and the reincorporation of that part of the street more into a parking facility, which not only allows for the addition of these multimodal shared use paths and curb cuts and extensions into the roadway to improve safety for pedestrians and bicyclists, but also improves access to really 3 key open spaces, starting with the Upper Common, the Lower Common, and then a nearby lake north of Church Street. This part of Wakefield's Main Street is not only within a key commercial and residential district, but is also near to and connected by local improvements being made along West Water Street for bicycle connectivity to the Wakefield commuter rail station. This project is within half a mile of that commuter rail station, and its district will be part of MBTA Communities Improvements for additional residential development in the area. These multimodal enhancements will not only provide for additional connectivity into these open spaces, but similar to Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway, this section of project is also identified for inclusion within the larger Mystic River Greenway regional connectivity project, lack of a better phrase there. In addition to these improvements here, the town, as stated, is also currently implementing additional bicycle improvements on adjacent roadways. For the last complete streets project, if we move on to the fifth one, is Westwood's reconstruction of Canton Street, which is from the East Street Rotary to University Avenue. Proponent here is Westwood, and the score for this project is 52.8 out of 100. The funding request is for $19 million. Key to this project is the inclusion of a bridge down at University Avenue, which intersects with freight lines at University Ave. University Ave is the Route 128 University Park corridor, which not only is a major employment corridor, but also includes freight connectivity throughout the rest of Canton. The bridge replacement, bridge superstructure replacement that is included in this project will increase the elevation of the bridge to facilitate freight movement underneath the bridge along those local rail lines. Furthermore, the current pavement condition for Canton Street warrants a complete roadway reconstruction with grade adjustments for user safety and the improvement of sight lines along the corridor. Currently, this roadway does not have sidewalks on either side of the roadway, and therefore this project will also construct new sidewalk along the western shoulder and a shared use path along the eastern shoulder. Not shown on the map here is a local road, which is Blue Hill Drive at the northern terminus of the project. Blue Hill Drive starts at the northern terminus of the project up at East Street, which is near the East Street Rotary over 128, and then continues eastward towards University Avenue. The town of Westwood is currently implementing bicycle lanes along that roadway, so the addition of a shared use path along Canton Street will provide for a direct, safe, multimodal connection for the residents along Canton Street into the Route 128 University Park MBTA commuter rail station. There's also public open space along Canton Street. If we move on to the next slide, we can talk about the one project that was received for intersection improvements. This is a signal installation project at Randolph and York Streets intersection. The primary focus here is the installation of a new signal with crosswalk improvements and ADA accessibility improvements near the Blue Hills Regional Technical School and also Massasoit Community College in Canton. This roadway, Randolph Street, has recently seen increased traffic volumes following the construction of affordable housing eastward along Randolph Street, which was an Avalon development community for the Prin Hills Apartments. This project status has not yet gone before MassDOT's Project Review Committee, and therefore the project is not yet far enough in its initiation process to be fully funded through the TIP. That being said, staff on the MPO right now are actively working not only with the town of Canton, but also partners at MassDOT Highway District 6 to not only initiate this project and identify potential avenues for near-term traffic safety improvements, but also more thorough adoption of potential complete streets improvements along Randolph Street. Randolph Street currently does not have any sidewalks along its length or bicycle lanes and is near to a key statewide top 200 crash location at the intersection of Randolph and Route 138. Furthermore, it also has trailheads for the Blue Hills more to the east of this project limit. Stay tuned for any developments that may emerge once this project is initiated in subsequent TIP cycles. With that, that brings us to the Community Connections Program. And as stated, I would like to hand this off to Logan Casey, who can speak in more detail to the 11 projects submitted here.
Thank you very much, Ethan, and hello, everyone again. I'm going to be going through the community connections, and I'll just note to begin with, for the organization of this presentation, the projects are ordered by the project type, while the project descriptions worksheet, that is ordered alphabetically by municipality. So starting with the first project, if you go to the next slide, we have the Lynn Broad Street Corridor Transit Signal Priority Project. This is a request from Lynn. The requested amount is $97,000. The project description is an upgrade to traffic signal equipment at 7 signalized intersections along this corridor. This would improve the safety and efficiency for all modes of transportation along one of the busiest corridors within Lynn. And just to give you some statistics to back that up, there's about 5,100 daily bus riders along this corridor. And then there's an additional 2,000 more housing units planned for this corridor as well. This project scored a total of 88 points out of 100 points. If you go on to the next slide. Moving into the next project type, Blue Bikes applications. So we received an application from Boston for electric Blue Bikes adoption. This project requested $1 million, and this would be for the purchase and installation of 272 electric e-bikes, with the purchase of 136 spare batteries as well for operations. I will note for the electric Blue Bikes adoption projects, these are for capital costs and not for the operational costs of the program. This project scored 84 points out of 100 points. If you go into the next slide. We also received a project for electric Blue Bikes through the city of Cambridge. This request was for $352,000. This project would be for the purchase of 90 new electric bikes and 45 spare batteries for the city of Cambridge's Blue Bikes network. This project scored a total of 81 points out of 100. And I'll note, like the project before, this is for capital costs and not for the operational costs. If you go into the next slide. From the city of Medford, we received a Blue Bikes expansion for the standard bikes, not the electric ones. This request was for $118,000. This would be for the purchase and installation of 4 new Blue Bikes docks within this city of Medford. This includes additionally 25 new bikes. And then the expansion is planned in Medford, targeting transit sites and public spaces. This project scored a total points at 78 out of 100. If you go to the next slide. Moving on to a different project type, bicycle parking or bicycle racks, we received another project from Medford. This is the Medford Bicycle Parking Tier 1 project. This was a request for $29,000. This would be for the purchase and installation of 40 bicycle racks that would create an additional 80 bicycle parking spaces within the city of Medford. And then the Tier 1, it refers to the highest priority zones for the cities. They have a couple extra tiers for additional bike installations, but Tier 1 is planned for commercial centers as well as transit hubs. This project scored 84 out of 100 points. If you go on to the next slide. The next bike rack project was the Canton Center Bicycle Rack Project. This was a request for $10,000. And then this would be for the purchase and installation of bike racks in downtown Canton, as well as at the Canton Center MBTA commuter rail station. And the city would work or the town of Canton, would work with the MBTA to market this. This project scored a total of 72 out of 100 points. If you go into the next slide. The next project is the Canton Public Schools Bike Program. This was also another request from the city or the town of Canton. The request was for $22,000. This would be for the installation of a bi-directional bike lane on Datum Street, as well as for the purchase and installation of bicycle racks at 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 high school within Canton. And this project overall scored 38 out of 100 points. I will note that this project scored lower because it is more of a point project and it was targeted towards public schools, whereas a lot of the other projects we had applied for in the Community Connections program were area projects and could score more points through that category. If you go on to the next slide, the next project is the next project type is the shuttles for our Community Connection Shuttle Program. The first application was for the Concord Workforce Shuttle. This request is for $369,000. This would be a fixed route shuttle service that connects users of the West Concord commuter rail station to several key employment concentrations throughout the city, as well as near Concord Center. And if you look on the thumbnail map, you can see a couple of the different stops listed. This project scored a total of 74 out of 100 points. If you go on to the next slide. So the next shuttle project we had was from the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. This is the Catch Connect Microtransit expansion, the phase 2. So the MPO has in the past funded a Catch Connect program through the MWRTA, but this is a request for phase 2. The request is for $400,000. This is an expansion of the microtransit program within the municipalities of Framingham and Natick. This would expand Catch Connect's availability during evening hours between 7:30 and 10:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then this program would provide supplemental public transportation for times of hours where traditional fixed route service in the areas have concluded. This project scored 90 out of 100 points total. If you go on to the next slide. This is also because the Catch Connect service is an expansion of a service we already fund. MWRTA did provide us with some ridership data quickly just to show the different phases of expansion and how those different expansion phases affected ridership. If you go to the next slide. The next project is the North Reading Demand Response Shuttle Pilot Program. This request was for $77,000. This is a new demand response shuttle that would be proposed for North Reading residents, prioritizing older adults, people with disabilities, non-emergency medical trips, but also members of the general public. And it would provide transportation within North Reading, but as well as to points outside of North Reading. This project scored a total of 77.25 points out of 100. If you go on to the final slide for this program, the last shuttle that was applied for is the Revere On-Demand Shuttle Service. This was a request from Revere, and it is requested at $980,000. This is a proposed shuttle service that would operate on a daily basis with a limited weekend service throughout the municipality of Revere. This would move residents from commercial locations, from transit locations, as well as residential areas. Initially, this service would be available for residents from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then weekend service would be slightly cut back from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. Saturday through Sunday. With that, that is the community connections. I'm going to pass it back to Ethan to talk about next steps for the TIP funding.
Thank you, Logan. So just to go on to the next slide and really contextualize where this discussion takes place, at the next, or I should say the March 16th MPO meeting, we'll have a first discussion around draft programming scenarios. As mentioned, a programming scenario really refers to which projects does the MPO intend to fund with the development of the new fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP, and when and where will they be funded? In late March, there will be the selection of a final programming scenario after additional discussion, which will then facilitate and inform a vote to release the draft TIP for public review on April 20th for final discussion and transmittal, or rather final endorsement on June 1st, such that it may be then transmitted and endorsed and incorporated into MassDOT's STIP. With that, I would like to now move on to the discussion part of this presentation.
Thank you, Ethan. Questions or comments from members? Eric Barassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Ethan, thank you for, and Logan for a very good presentation, very comprehensive. Question, Ethan, when you were referring at the beginning of your presentation to the sort of, policy that we would like to program projects that are, close to or at 25% design, that's not limiting the amount of projects that are before us, right? Like these projects are not all at that level, correct? These are projects that are, at various levels of design. And I guess my question is, excluding the, or second question related, excluding the community connections projects, I think we have 9 other projects. You only received 9 projects as part of the TIP development process, or were there others that you received that we were not able to score because there was not enough information about them?
That's correct. In this case, there were only 9 projects that were applied for within the TIP development process, of which 7 were applied for during the designated timeline between November 15th to December, I want to say 23rd, and an additional 2 were applied for after. So 9 total.
Okay, I would just, and this can and maybe is a topic, and I'll discuss this with the chair and staff for a conversation maybe later after we've done the TIP process and plan that in years past I believe we used to receive upwards of 20 or 30 new projects, and now we're only kind of receiving in this term 9. I think there were not that many last time, and I think it's worth a conversation of kind of why is the pipeline of projects smaller? So just wanted to flag that, and thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Brian Kane.
Thank you, David. And yeah, my internet kicked out for about a third of that. So if this has been answered, apologies. I guess with respect to the Ipswich Cranes Beach project, I'm just curious if there's any scope in the scoring. And again, David, if this is a better question for next time, feel free to interrupt me. At what point do we sort of just say, or at what point in the scoring, or is there a scope in the scoring to say that this project is lost to climate change and throwing good money after it is a waste of taxpayer dollars, if you know what I'm saying? Is there scope for us to sort of say, this is a great project, we wish we could do it, but the ocean's going to win, not us, and we shouldn't put any public money after?
Right. So I do think that is a question not for staff.
Because I guess as I look at this project and its resiliency, and I get it, well, it's a scoring question, kind of.
Well, so let me take a cut at I think answering it, Brian. So I think I guess staff could, of their own volition, look at it and say, we're not going to give you those scores for resiliency because we believe, to use your phrase, the ocean's going to win eventually. I think that's a hard thing to ask staff to do. I think what you want to have is a policy discussion by board members about, are there, and let's not talk, we can talk specifically about this project in the future, but is there infrastructure that we should start thinking about, for want of a better word, abandoning, or at least stopping spending significant money to retrofit because we don't believe it's going to, in the long run, work. That's a policy discussion that the MPO has to have amongst the members. I mean, we can ask staff to prepare information to the best of their ability, but I don't think that's a question that Ethan can answer. I think that's a question when we get to scenario building that an individual member or members can bring up, and we can have a debate or discussion by the members, I think. If that answers your question. If it doesn't, all right, cool. But so I saw the person from the trustees raise their hand. If you want to talk right now about it, you can. Otherwise, You should plan to come back on the 13th when we're talking about, I'm sorry, the 16th. We're talking about scenarios in case this discussion comes up. But if you want to talk later, raise your hand again. I'll call you after the members. Leonard Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I perhaps have forgotten on the Community Connections Program, the metric called fiscal sustainability. What does that mean?
So I will try to answer it, and then Logan can. That means that you as a shuttle proponent have provided to staff some kind of level of information. I'll use the phrase commitment in air quotes, that says people, there is either a commitment from the city or from businesses or whatever, that as the MPO's 3-year funding winds down, the project's not just going to stop. There'll be a local commitment to continue it.
Okay, great. I had forgotten that, great, because I mean, they all were 10, so there was no distinguishing amongst them for that. It seems like
that's why I put it in air quotes.
Yeah, so then it's like a requirement, I would imagine. But thank you. And for the Canton Public Schools bike program, I mean, I do see that the mode shift is 3, meaning whereas everything else is in 20s. I mean, why is that? I mean, I think I know the answer to it, but if you could just
well, I'm going to have to yield to Logan and or Ethan on this one, because that's a staff score that I may or may not agree with.
Yeah,
Logan?
I meant you as in Ethan or Logan.
Yeah. You, Ethan, Logan, either one of you?
Yeah, so the mode shift category, or Ethan, if you want to go first.
Yeah, Len, I can dig into this a little bit deeper. So the mode shift category focuses on the number of trips that would be diverted from automobiles, of course, to other modes of transportation, in the case of a bike rack project being bikes. For the Canton Public Schools project, it's a little bit unique because this is simultaneously not only an expansion of bicycle parking facilities, but also state of good repair. The bicycle racks at these public schools in Canton are currently effectively obsolete because they're in such a state of disrepair. Currently, approximately 10% of Canton's, I want to say 3,000 students in their total student body are biking to school. The proponents say that they would estimate approximately an increase of that to about 15% with the implementation of these racks throughout the community, which does have some mode shift implications. But given most of the users would already be biking to school, it doesn't have a significant one. That being said, it does enable additional trips and the addition of additional safe infrastructure for bicycling, including bicycle lanes, which the town is pursuing, would further facilitate that.
It wasn't an answer, I thought, so I'm glad I asked. Thank you very much. It's helpful.
Thank you, Lynn.
I don't know. I see that Gene Manning, who's the town planner, is on, so.
Ethan, I will manage the public, okay? Because I already saw her and told her I would call on her after we took on members, and Ken Miller has his hand raised. Ken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question on the TIP project scoring summary spreadsheet. Exactly what does cost per monthly user mean? Is that the monthly cost divided by the number of estimated trips per month?
Yes, that's the monthly cost estimated by the number of passenger trips per month in the case of a shuttle or for bicycle racks or lift users.
So that it actually is the cost per trip, per use or trip, not cost per user. Is that correct? So I think that I think that's just I think a better description of what that actually means would be helpful. Because cost per monthly user is not a metric that is meaningful, because you can interpret it in so many different ways.
Yes, so at some point soon, Ethan, you, I, Derek, Kagan, we'll have some discussion about how to distinguish between cost per trip and cost per user. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Now, any other members before I call them to the general public? Seeing none. Linda, oh wait, Brian, you have your hand up. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Brian. It's your turn.
I did have a second question, just on the Boston Sullivan Square project. Did I hear that Ethan say it's 100% designed? And if so, does that include coordination with MBTA right of way for diversions and whatnot? Should we fund it? I just want to make sure it really is ready to go.
Well, I think this is either Ethan or Jim Fitzgerald, because or maybe Bill Conroy, because I would have a different answer on what it means that it's quote unquote 100% design. So Bill, Ethan, Bill, Jim, Ethan.
I can, I might be able to speak to that. And if any folks, I think Boston DPW may be here to weigh in further, but what happened in this situation is that the city of Boston designed the bridge internally and brought its projected scope of work to 100% internally in April 2022. However, they did not present this project to MassDOT until the review committee in last December. And therefore, while their project info status is currently at project review committee only, they will likely need to make adjustments to that 100% design going forward. But that design gives a general overview on the extent of the necessary structural improvements to the bridge itself, which are the key driver of really the cost, scope of work, and project readiness. I don't know if other folks want to weigh in there.
Jim, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think Ethan said it quite well. Just to clarify, I think the city has developed 100% design for the structural needs and elements of the reconstruction of the bridge. But we still need to repackage that and submit that to MassDOT for review. So I think Para's here. I don't know if he wants to add to that, but I think we're confident we can move quickly to submit appropriate MassDOT design standards for that review process.
Thank you, Jim. Brian, I got your answer.
Yeah, just to follow up. So I thank you. So it's 100% in as far as the city is concerned, but not as MassDOT is concerned, and that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Yep. So, Para, do you want to say something on this, or are we good? You can speak if you're ready, Para, and then I will get to Miss Orell, I promise. Para, do you have something you want to add on the bridge, since it's in front of us right now? This member question.
Again, David, Jim and team members said perfectly. The bridge is in need of attention. It is at a very critical location, and critical location meaning it is not the best location to have an awkward moment. So we would appreciate your assistance in managing the situation before the situation manages a lot of us.
Thank you, Para. Any other comments from members? Seeing none, Ms. Linda Orell, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Linda Orell. I run government relations for the trustees of reservations. I just had one quick comment. We spent several years working on the design for Argilla Road, and the design, it is designed to be resilient from climate change impacts through 2070, making it a somewhat unique transportation project. So it's essentially a 50-year design, which we think makes it worthwhile for state and federal investments.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jean Manning. You're muted, Gene. There you go.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just one of the members had a question on the Canton Public Schools bike racks. That we're fine. The town is fine in breaking that off from the work on Dedham Street. That's one of our 3 elementary schools here. And that idea did come up from our students here in Canton to promote a bicycle routing for our students. We do have good bike paths and accessibility to the high school, our other elementaries, and we're building a new middle school here as well. So appreciate your consideration, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Derek Schuster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question about the blue bike projects that are proposed, the electric bike purchases for Boston and Cambridge, whether or not the scope for those projects or any other blue bikes investments include adaptive cycles. cycles that can be used for persons with disabilities or with balance issues or looking to use shared cargo bikes. If not, I feel like that would be something worthwhile for the MPO to consider for future projects. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions or comments at this time? Jim Nee.
Hello, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to say thank you to the MPO and to the staff for their help and for their collaboration with us. Our Catch Connect microtransit program, we believe, is quite sustainable, and it's been quite successful some of the other phases that we have tried. We actually currently have the cost per passenger trip, and that is per trip, down to about $20. So we're very excited about the opportunity with this this type of new mode to try this on evening transportation. This mode has been well adopted by our ADA community and by our low-income community on the weekends where we've tried it. And we've never really had fixed route service into the evening in Framingham and Natick. So the opportunity to pilot this program is quite exciting. So I just wanted to thank you, thank the staff, and all that consideration is greatly appreciated.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions at this time from members or the public? Seeing none, I believe Ethan said that we will be developing scenarios or talking about scenarios on the 16th. So everybody who's interested should please plan to attend again on the 16th. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Logan. Next up is Draft Universe of LRTP roadway projects, Michelle Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. I'm here to speak today about a draft universe of roadway projects for our upcoming LRTP Destination 2050. Just as a reference, there is a series of tables posted in a PDF and HTML on the MPO meeting calendar, and you can use that to follow along when I talk about the specific contents of those tables later in the presentation. Next slide, please. So just kind of the high level elements of today's presentation. As you know, coming up later this spring when the MPO will be making programming decisions for Destination 2050, these include not only funding, allocating funding to investment programs, but also selecting, in some cases, specific projects to be included in the long-range transportation plan. So to support that second decision, MPO staff have been working on a draft universe of projects. And this is really shaped by the policies that the MPO established in 2020 and that we reviewed back in January of this year to guide, the types of projects that should be included in the MPO's LRTP. So the material I'm going to present to you today is specific to roadway projects. Later in the spring, we will add additional information about transit projects. So really my goal for today is to introduce this universe to you all. Depending on the time available, we're happy to take questions about projects listed or perhaps not listed in the universe. And mostly, this provides a jumping off point, or if you want to get in touch with staff with any questions that you have following the meeting, we can do that as well. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the topics we'll cover. I'll give a brief refresher on the criteria and policies for including projects in the LRTP. I'll talk at a high level about the approach we use to develop this draft roadway universe. I'll go through the set of 4 tables that we have included in the handout for today, and then talk about some next steps. Next slide, please. So just to kind of highlight where this fits in within our overall set of Destination 2050 development activities, this falls within that kind of strategies categories. And we think of strategies both in terms of our investment programs, as well as some of these major projects that get included in the LRTP. Next slide, please. So just as a quick refresher of those policies that we covered back in January, back in 2020, the MPO kind of revisited its approach to including projects in the LRTP based on kind of parallel discussions that were happening around its major infrastructure program, changes in federal guidance and other things of that nature. So really the goal coming out of those policy discussions was to limit the projects that are in the LRTP to those that are federally required to be presented there to respond to air quality conformity and other federal regulations. And really the goal and follow-on purpose of this is to really put those decisions about funding large projects as part of the capital investment decisions that you all make annually when programming the TIP. So that table that's on the lower part of the slide compares kind of the before and after of this policy change prior to October 2020 and back when our current plan, Destination 2040, which was adopted in 2019, was being developed. The LRTP reflected all projects that changed the capacity of the transportation network and projects that cost more than 20 million. Following these policy discussions from back in 2020, now the LRTP would include regionally significant projects, and I'll talk a little bit more about that definition in a minute, although it does reference that capacity changing element. Projects that are under National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA review, particularly elevated levels of review, such as developments of environmental impact statements. One important thing to note is that there is no longer a cost threshold for projects to be included in the LRTP. Next slide, please. So to touch a little bit in more detail about regionally significant projects, this definition comes from air quality regulations, and you can see some of the statutory references listed on the slide. These are also described in a memo that's posted on the January 26th, 2023 page of the MPO meeting calendar. So these regionally significant projects are determined both by what facilities that they're located on and what the project is planned to do. So in terms of location, these projects are located on facilities that serve regional transportation needs. This is defined as all principal and arterial highways. This is kind of a minimum standard that's been set in federal regulation, but the one that's been accepted for MPO policy. On the transit side, which we'll talk more about at a future meeting, this includes all fixed guideway transit projects that provide an alternative to regional highway travel. In general, these are the types of projects that would be reflected in the networks in a regional travel demand model. So we talked about the location, now talking about the things that these projects do. These are the kinds of projects that are expected to potentially impact air quality, either by adding or removing system capacity. So if you have kind of more vehicles, especially those burning fossil fuels, you have the potential, if you're accommodating more vehicles, there's more vehicle traffic, potential for negative air quality impact. And so that's the kind of things that we want to be looking for. Federal regulations do define exemptions to these guidelines. One example is our projects with road diets specifically for safety purposes. But again, some more details about those exemptions are highlighted in the January 26th memo. Next slide, please. So another important part of our policy not only relates to the types of projects, but when projects will be programmed in the LRTP. So this graphic highlights the time bands that are included in Destination 2050. These are, approximately 5 years long, except for that last one, which stretches from 2045 to 2050. So again, this is highlighting the two types of decisions that the MPO will make to allocate funding over this period. You'll notice that allocating funding to investment programs, which generally accommodate more local community scale projects, funding will be allocated across all years that are covered by the LRTP period. However, as you can see shown in those green boxes at the bottom of the diagram, MPO policy stipulates that we're only programming projects within the first two time bands of the LRTP. One set of decisions you'll actually be making as part of the TIP this year for that first time band, 2024 to 28. And then, the LRTP process will account for projects in that next 5-year time band of 2029 to 33. Next slide, please. So to sum up, the projects that we were looking for to include in this universe are those that are considered regionally significant based on their location and characteristics. We also took a look at any projects that might be undergoing elevated levels of NEPA review. And to bring in that time element, we were really looking at projects that could be advertised in federal fiscal year 2033 or earlier. So the universe documents that we'll be talking about a little later in the presentation include projects regardless of funding source. So you'll see that some projects are currently identified as receiving MPO funding, either through the TIP or through the previous LRTP. There are some projects that are highlighted as having received or plan to receive MassDOT funding or funding from other sources. And finally, some projects where no specific funding allocation has been made yet. In general, these are all meant to reflect kind of the comprehensive range of projects that may be implemented in the region for the purposes of developing the LRTP. Next slide, please. So we looked at a couple different sources to put this universe together. Of course, we reflected on the information that was included in the Destination 2050 plan, so the projects that were ultimately selected, as well as the content in that universe of projects. And we also looked at the projects that were included in the 2023 through 27 TIP, that's the active TIP now, as well as the universe of projects that was developed for the TIP that's under development now, 2024 through 28. In the process of going through all of these projects, we've been consulting with MassDOT, with, to some extent, municipal folks, all to kind of gather information about, what these projects might do, how their scopes might be changing compared to information we have previously. And I want to stress that this consultation is ongoing. This is kind of an initial conversation about the universe. And we may make adjustments to it, add, update, or remove projects as new information becomes available over the next month or so. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn to the material in that handout. So the first table, table 1, covers the status of projects that were included in Destination 2040. And so you can see we've, in terms of advancing these projects, we've made progress in a number of areas. In terms of the 13 MPO funded projects that are included in that table. And again, this is reflective as of Amendment 1 to Destination 2040, which was approved back in April of 2020. Looking where we are today, we have 6 projects that are, advertised or under construction. The major transit project that was included in that LRTP, the Green Line extension, is now in service. We have several projects in the 2023 through 27 are active TIP, so closer to that stage of funding and advertisement. These include projects such as McGrath Boulevard and Rutherford Avenue. And we do have projects that are included in Destination 2040, but are not yet programmed in the TIP. And I'll talk a little bit more about those projects when discussing the subsequent tables. As I mentioned, to provide a comprehensive picture, the LRTP includes other projects that may not necessarily be funded by MPO dollars. And we have, several projects in this category as well, including projects, that are upcoming in our TIP. And, as a highlight of a project that is still out ahead of us, the Alston Multimodal Project. Next slide, please. So table 2 highlights the status of projects that are specifically in the 2023 through 27 TIP. So you can kind of see the 6 projects listed here. They may be in a slightly different order within the table, but you can see kind of based on the readiness days discussion from which you heard information about at the February 16th MPO meeting, kind of the years when these projects are likely to be scheduled based on revised readiness information and where they might fall in those 2 columns on the right with the dots within the time bands of Destination 2050. There's something else I wanted to mention. I'm just trying to recall it. Oh yes, and we also have in the kind of center column on the table the MPO investment program. So you notice that the MPO funded projects will have specific investment programs listed. Some projects, many of them, do fall within the major infrastructure program, which generally captures, the larger scale projects happening within the MPO region, but not all of them do. So there are cases where there might be an LRTP project that needs to be included in the LRTP, but doesn't necessarily qualify for the criteria for the major infrastructure program. So those policies are not one-to-one. Next slide, please. So the third table includes projects that have been approved by the MassDOT Project Review Committee and have been assigned, identification numbers. These are projects that again meet those criteria, particularly for whether or not they are regionally significant. You'll notice that this table includes one project that is in Destination 2040, but has not yet advanced to the tip. And this is the Route 126-135 grade crossing project in Framingham. Next slide, please. So to kind of round out the set of 4 tables, we have also pre-project review committee projects, projects that are in conceptual design, where there may be conversations happening to develop that design and initiate those projects, but those official steps haven't been taken yet. And this is the location of the remaining project that was included in Destination 2040, but not yet included in the tip. This is the Bedford Hartwell Complete Streets project, also referred to as Route 4-225, and Hartwell Ave project in Lexington. Next slide, please. So again, this is kind of the menu from which we'll continue to gather more information about projects, and ultimately after the MPO selects a set of these projects for inclusion in the LRTP, there are additional requirements that these projects will be subject to. For example, they're being assessed for anticipated greenhouse gas reductions per the Global Warming Solutions Act, reflection in a Title VI disparate impact, disproportionate burden analysis, and also making sure that we're in compliance with any air quality conformity regulations that apply to the LRTP. Next slide, please. So just to close out with some next steps, to give you a sense of what's coming next for the universe, over the next month or so, we'll be continuing to gather information and determining if this universe requires any updates. As I mentioned, we'll be bringing in information about transit projects for your consideration as well. There may be opportunities to learn more specifically about those 2 projects I mentioned that are not yet in the tip, but are in Destination 2040, so you can deliberate how to advance them if you choose to do so. And also we'll be scoring projects based on a set of high-level LRTP criteria, building off of the scoring discussion that happened at the earlier part of the meeting. Those tip projects are projects with a lot of kind of design detail behind them. We do kind of a more 30,000 foot type of scoring for the LRTP, so that you can have a basis to compare projects, although we tend to not have as much design information to bring to that evaluation process, so that those scores tend to be a little bit coarser than what you might see from the tip. And all of this is to kind of feed into decisions that'll be happening, later in the spring, starting in April, where the MPO will be sizing those investment programs, and to some degree, considering the costs associated with some projects that need to be in the LRTP that fall within those programs, and then selecting a set of projects for inclusion in Destination 2050. Next slide, please. So I just, want to, to the degree that time allows, reflect on today's goal, which is to take questions you have about the project universe, either now as time allows or following, the meeting. I do want to reiterate what Tegan had mentioned in her executive director's report, that questions about these projects should be directed to the interim LRTP manager, Bradley Putnam, and you can see his email address, bputnam@ctps.org, referenced on the slide. And I'll just close by saying that it's been a great opportunity and a pleasure to have supported the Boston Region MPO over the past 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Questions, comments by members? Not about how wonderful Michelle's been for 10 years. You can talk to her when she's working for me 2 weeks from now. More about what she presented. Comments, questions, concerns, issues? Well, Michelle, you did such a great job that nobody's got any questions, I guess. So we will all applaud you, Michelle. Good job. Thank you, Michelle. Next item is the members' items. Are there any? Other than let's all applaud Jonathan Church too, who's also leaving today and coming to work for me, by the way. Good job, Jonathan. Lynn Diggins, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, that's pretty gratuitous, you know, they're like, they're coming to work for me. Wow,
Yeah.
wow. Thank
No,
you.
I just want everybody to know they won't be far away if you want to talk to them, you know.
Yeah, okay, fine.
If
I'm
we're
behind
ever all
that.
back together in the building, you just come upstairs.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other member items at this time? Seeing none, don't forget, we're meeting almost every week this month, and I believe the next meeting is, oh, I'll probably say it wrong. Is it the 9th? I think it's
It's
the
the
9th.
night. Yes, it is, sir.
Thank you, Jonathan. So the next meeting is next week, so don't forget. And with that, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Lynn Diggins.
Atlanta Diggins seconds.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Bye, guys.
Bye.